For those joining us, we're just going to wait a couple of minutes while we give everybody a chance to join. I'll be looking to start in about 2 or 3 minutes' time.
Stephen, what's that picture in the background?
I've got a few. It's a Sebastian Vettel cap, as it happens. Right in the background there. I've got beneath it, you can't see, I've got a Raikkonen and Massa cap as well. Back from the days when I used to follow Formula One a bit more avidly. I've Jenson Button's Brawn GP glove behind the monitors. So yeah, I've got a few bits and pieces I've collected.
You used to travel around to the races?
Yeah, I did a few. Did Monte Carlo, did Monza, did Silverstone a number of times. So yeah, used to be quite a fan, but I'll confess, really, the last time I watched the race for was about 10 years ago now. So yeah, I found the outside world. Just joining us. We're just waiting a few minutes to give people a chance to join. We can see people connecting and then connecting up their audio. So we're going to give another couple of minutes before we start. Yourself, big sports fan?
Well, you can see on the walls all the pictures that I haven't got. The reason being is I just renovated the office and all the pictures went to the picture framers to be framed. And obviously, I'm not going to have them back for months. So yeah, there's actually most of my pictures involve some kind of robot or monster or something. I'm a bit geeky like that.
IT industry for it.
Yeah.
I've got my Lego collection of Apollo rockets and whatnot, and just on the outer ship as well. So not entirely alone there.
Well, my son would love those. I just have a lot of hats. I tend to wear hats to all the meetings. I have a lot of meetings during the day. With your Apollo, we can have a space helmet.
Excellent. So I'm just going to give one more minute, and then we're going to start. I can see we've got about 10 people or so joined. Okay, so I think we should crack on from here, Simon. So hello, everybody. My name is Steve Harley. I'm from ACS. Welcome to another one of our series of webinars that we've been running over the course of the last couple of weeks. I wanted to introduce you to Simon Minton from Cisco. Cisco are a huge partner of ACS, and as I'm sure you've all been aware, are kind of really leading the charge around security, agile working, mobility, and making sure that events like this can happen with things like WebEx. And Simon's just going to share with us some of their observations and learnings, some of how their technology can help us in this time. And really just gives a flavour for how Cisco see the world. So I'm going to hand over to Simon now. During the course of the session, we do have the Q&A panel. Please do raise any questions that you've got, and we will take them at the end. So over to you then, Simon.
Morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Steve. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I have a mini herd of elephants performing ballet. That's what it sounds like next door. They're doing PE with Joe Wicks. There's a lot of hammering on the floor. So yeah, we're going to talk about the future of how we see the future of work. I mean, I've been working remotely for 15 years now. and I just see that the world is starting to move that way as well. So I'm going to bring a presentation. This is a hat that I will be wearing temporarily. I'm doing lots of webinars and conversations with customers at the moment. So in order to break up the calls, I'm wearing a number of different hats. I've got 13 here, which I will swap between. I'm going to move to a presentation. Hopefully you can all see that. There are questions that you can posit in the text, and at the end we'll go through those questions. I think it's a little bit hard to be interactive in these types of sessions, which is unfortunate, but I think we'll just go through the questions that you've got at the end. So this is me. I've been at Cisco just over a year. I've been working in cybersecurity for about 18 years, so quite a long time. I'm working with a range of large organizations and small organizations. And then obviously the past few weeks, Cisco's been doing a lot, working with a lot of customers to help them get connected during lockdown all over the world. I just wanted to talk about where we see some of the market moving. And this is a global study, actually by a company called Merchant Savvy, which you can find on the internet, quite useful. This was 2019, and they looked at across the world how people, what are the perceptions of people towards flexible working and remote working, and the actual reality of that. So how their companies across the country provide those kind of facilities and policies towards remote working. So in the UK, we have a fairly close mix of or match of businesses that are open and have some kind of flexible working, and those that are looking for, people that are looking for flexible working. And what we're seeing over the last few years is that there's a big shift towards people wanting to work remotely for various reasons. This is another survey done last year, and you can see a vast majority of people enjoy working remotely. Better work-life balance, improved productivity, etc. I think with lockdown, maybe better work-life balance and improved productivity might not be the case if you've got children at home or endlessly distracted with other things. But I think in general, pre and perhaps post-COVID, generally people seem to enjoy having that better work-life balance that they get from working from home. And it might not be working from home, you might be working from a coffee shop. I live in Bristol, so there's endless independent coffee shops here, and I have about 50 loyalty cards. I spend my entire week moving from one coffee shop to another coffee shop, meeting up with people and going to co-working space as well. So that I'm either traveling and on the road, or I tend not to be at home. I get a little bit bored at home. So people are different, but some people like to be at home and have clear space. Some people like to have, like me, I like to be sat in a coffee shop with lots of things going on around, have my headset on, listen to music, and I feel I'm more productive that way. I can concentrate. If I'm at home alone, I can't concentrate. So everybody works differently, but there's definitely a big trend. I think we saw technology companies embrace this change quite early. As I said, I've been in tech for 18 years, and I pretty much from the beginning worked from home. And now we're seeing other sectors. I've been working with NHS trusts over the past few weeks, with small business, with very large global banks that I've had, for 60 years. Working from home wasn't possible, and now everybody's forced to. So it's almost a dogma that some companies have had around working from home is changing, and probably for the better for our environment, stress levels, etc. And obviously, then we had coronavirus come in, which is now now 6 of lockdown, and this is obviously going to change people's perceptions and the way that we work. And it has. And if you think about the first few weeks of lockdown, I don't know what you were like. That was pretty much my experience as going to the local Asda store. Toilet paper had disappeared. Various other items were still there, but a lot of that disappeared. So it's just interesting to see people's perceptions around what was important, what they needed to stockpile, etc. And then I don't know about your experience if you have kids, but certainly the first few weeks were pretty much like this, non-stop fighting and arguing, and now they seem to have settled into a more peaceful rhythm. There's still occasions to this, but working from home when you've got kids and your partner might also be working or having to do other things, it can be difficult or stressful. I'm waiting for my daughter actually to run in anytime. And then obviously the connectivity issue. So one of the companies I work with is a global bank. They have about 200,000 people. They have a lot of people in China, and they had during lockdown in China, they had instances of staff sneaking into the offices and actually removing the desk. They had no other way to work. They weren't provided with laptops or any kind, so they actually physically removed their desktops. I managed to get them home, but then they got them home and I found out that there wasn't any way to connect it to the internet because it wasn't connected to the network. So the help desks were overwhelmed with calls, thousands of people trying to connect. So that was over a period of about 3-4 weeks. That was highly stressful for that organization. And it's also the same. My wife works for a public sector company, and they didn't the ability to log on remotely, which probably brings us to the next area of pain. I've experienced this myself. It's just trying to connect to the VPN, and there are various reasons. You know that the VPN itself might have run out of connection, might have run out of bandwidth. So again, for the global bank we were working with, they didn't have enough capacity to get the users online. My wife actually couldn't get online for about a month unless she went on at 10 o'clock at night, because there's only so many concurrent connections you can have with traditional VPN. And this is obviously then causes issues because you have too many people trying to log on at the same time, and then you have a very poor experience for the user. But in a more blissful way, this is how we see the future of working on a beach or from the garden. Definitely how we see companies moving and organizations moving, and I think COVID will probably accelerate this, is that staff will continue to work, increasingly work remotely. And it might be that they work from home, or it might be that they work from co-working spaces. For instance, in Bristol 3 years ago, I had a startup, and there was only one office. There's only one co-working office to work out of. Now there are 8, and they're quite large as well. So many of my friends that some work for large companies, some work for small companies. They're all working together in a co-working space. So we all walk down to the co-working space. We work from there, even though we work for different companies, but then we can collaborate as well. Sometimes we go to the office. Sometimes we might be at home. Sometimes we might be in the coffee shop. Might even be abroad, logging on. My wife is from Italy, and I was thinking, is it possible to move to Sicily for a month or however long lockdown lasts? That was obviously a naive thought, but that would have been me in the middle picture at the top, sat on the beach, working from a beach somewhere. So, but I do think that the future will be increasingly like this. COVID will accelerate it, and certainly as a company, that's what we're seeing customers ask for. They want to become better connected. They want their staff to be able to connect from wherever they are into whatever applications they need to, without friction. So we're going to look at solutions that we can do this. How do we get to this state of play? We want modern, remote, and secure access to our applications and data wherever they be. And we also want it with or without a VPN. Yes, Ron, without a VPN. You don't necessarily need a VPN now to access your applications and your data. Actually, Duo works 100% of the time. It's in there. This is a tech joke, that it works 60% of the time, but it works all the time. I'm going to walk you through what Duo Beyond is and give you a little bit of context and background. So about 2013, Google suffered an attack called Aurora, and this was an attack on their applications. It was a breach of their data. And what they did is that they re-architected the way that they provided access to their applications to their staff. So this was both kind of on-premise applications that they had, and also SaaS applications, cloud applications. And they developed a framework called Beyond Corp. So you can go and have a look at that from Google and how they did it. Duo Security is a company Cisco acquired last year for a couple of $1 billion. They were the first commercial company to take up what Google had done and build out a commercial product. And it follows a very similar principles of zero trust. You might have heard about zero trust as a new methodology for ensuring better hygiene around access to applications and data. And this is very much one of the first products that came into the built on the principles of zero trust. I'm going to walk you through that. What you have is a remote user, such as all of us right now are sitting remotely at home, probably. We're trying to get access to an application. That application might be on your corporate network. It might be a SaaS application. It might be your email. It could be any web application or other types of application. What Duo does, it will actually look at your device. It will fingerprint your device. It will look at fairly granular detail of what your device, what operating system it's got, what patches it's patched at, various other, if you've got biometrics installed or screen lock on your device, all of these different things, and you can create policy around what device you will allow onto the certain application. So on a per application basis, you can create a policy for that device. It might be a corporate laptop that you've provided to your employees, or it might be that they have their own laptop that they're using, and you can allow either, but you might want the laptop to be patched. You might want to have certain software on it to protect it. So once that is verified and validated against policy that you've created, then the next step is to validate and authenticate the user. So what happens then is that on an app on your phone, you are authenticated. So basically, you are sent a prompt on your phone, and which you have to then accept. Normally, then you've got to access your phone. You've got to enable your biometrics to get into your phone, and then you accept. So that's adding what's called a multi-factor layer of authentication on top of your username and password that you get to your application. Then you're authenticated using a separate device, which is normally your phone. At that point, you have access to your application, and you can continue on to normal. Additionally, if you want to, you can provide employees with a dashboard of all of the applications that they've got access to, so they can access the dashboard in a simple way, just in the same way as we've just gone through, and then they get a single sign-on directly to the application that they're permitted to access. So you might have 25 applications that you're allowed to access, and it's pretty much seamless access. Once you've gone through that initial authentication phase, you're allowed into those applications. So it just makes logging on to your application much simpler, and you might be logging on from a phone. I tend to use this phone. It's a giant phone, so I tend to use this actually more than I use my laptop. Or you might be using your laptop, and whatever you want to use, you can have granular policies to enable access from me to access that application. If we look to the left-hand side of the screen, this is a kind of a high-level architecture. You have the user, which is us. We have the device that we're using, which is right now my laptop that I'm using. So this is going to look at my laptop. It's going to judge whether it's look at the access policy for this laptop. Does it have all the patches? Is it authenticated according to the policy that's been set? And then the next point is going to look. It's going to send me a pass prompt to my phone, which I'm going to click into my phone, click accept, and that's going to log me on into the application itself. It's very different from traditional VPN, where you have to log in a VPN termination point, and then you're directed to your application. This is much more user-friendly, and it's more secure, and I'll go through why it's secure a little bit later. Hopefully that makes sense. You can ask as many questions as you want. There's also demos. I can show you demos of exactly how this works in practice as well. So yes, it's science. Thank you, Google, for pioneering this, but zero trust, if you haven't heard about it, you'll probably start to hear about it now. It is just a way of thinking around how you design technology with security in mind. And in this scenario, it's really simple. Security has to become simpler if we want our staff and users to use it more effectively. Security, in my belief, has got too complex. So we actually have to design security with our users in mind, and I think Duo is a great proponent of this. As mentioned, it's also really secure. It's more secure than traditional VPN in many respects. And I won't go into this too deeply, but at traditional VPN, you have a VPN terminator that everyone then connects to, and then from there, you're allowed to access your application. In practice, if you compromise the user credentials and you're able to access the VPN, once you're inside the network, then you can traverse the network, you can laterally move and pivot into different applications to get where you're going. Hence why we had a whole plethora of network security tools that grew over the last 15, 20 years. Zero trust really means that you're going to bound certain elements. And in this case, it's the user is almost the perimeter. We don't have the concept of a perimeter anymore, like a VPN terminator, a network. The network we assume to be insecure. So you actually want to verify every time the user accesses. You want to validate the user, the device, and also you put security around the application itself. So you're moving away from the concept of a perimeter and accessing the perimeter, and then once you're inside the perimeter, you're secure. We're moving away from that to assuming that the network is insecure. We've got a number of customers, and over the past few months, having worked with a whole range of large organizations and small organizations, Cisco was pretty fun. One of the fundamental suppliers to the Nightingale hospitals. We've got one in Bristol as well, also one in London, and getting them set up. This is a quote from Kayak, one of our customers. But in my experience over the past month, we got an NHS trust running on Duo in a single day. So it's really simple to deploy. It doesn't take weeks or months. It just literally takes hours and days to set it up. And from a user perspective, it's very much similar to consumer technology. They download an app from the App Store on their device, and that's pretty much it. They don't have to do any more. The overhead on IT, on your IT desk, a number of calls coming in, it's really, really minimal compared to other types of technology, specifically security, which can sometimes have a high burden on IT staff. So this one's designed to be pretty much frictionless. We have all of the wizards that customers can go to, but there's really not much to do apart from download an app. From a security point of view, what we're doing here is we're providing a lot of visibility and quite granular visibility into what devices are being used. If they're corporate devices, if they are personal devices. If they're personal devices, you might allow them access to certain applications, but not others. And you might want certain things. You might want to ensure that they're not jailbroken, or they have the screen lock or biometrics. You might have what's called adaptive security, where certain applications require additional authentication methods. What's coming is that we're going to have continuous authentication, where you're continuously the way I hold my phone, the way I type on my keyboard will be assessed, and that will continuously verify. So this is something that's coming, I think, in the industry over the next few years. But right now, what you've got is fairly granular understanding of those apps. And in a secure and private way. We don't want to provide information about a user's browse history. That's not important. It's about whether they've got the right controls in place on the phone. So from a BYOD perspective, we're ensuring that we are compliant with all the regulations out there. Also, you've got, as mentioned, pretty granular detail into those what's on those devices. You know, particularly corporate devices, you need to have certain inventory controls around, perhaps for compliance or otherwise for security reasons. So this provides all of that well. So from a corporate perspective, you get as much information as you need from those devices, and you can obviously create granular policies around that. For the BYOD, the personal devices, you can have also fairly granular control, but without invading the privacy of the user. And we've got lots of pretty graphs. If you did want to see it on you can get a good overview of what your users are, how they're accessing, and it can give you insights into where users are accessing from. So you might also want to lock down on geolocation. So you don't want your staff accessing applications from certain territories around the world. So as mentioned, that's also fairly granular. You can provide that kind of capability, and you've got that visibility across your estate, where users are logging on, how they're logging on, with what are they accessing, etc. So that was a fairly quick run through. This is actually the end of the presentation, so I'm hoping that we've got a few questions that you might have, and I think Steve is going to bring those up.
Yeah, I will, Simon. Well, at the moment, if anybody wants to ask a question, just if you use either the chat or the Q&A feature, then obviously I'll raise them and we'll try and cover them off. Just whilst we're waiting to see if anybody has any, Simon. I think one of the interesting things, I don't know how Cisco see this, but one of the concerns that I have from a cybersecurity point of view of what's gone on is we've got this huge shift in the way that we're using IT and technology. So all of that work that has gone into protecting and having policies written for, our normal day-to-day operations, that's all shifted now. In the way that we work is shifted. So you mentioned there people taking devices to home, that greater flexibility, and a lot of small business I don't think is necessarily caught up. So I think it's really important that we look at tools like Duo to be able to protect it. And here's we've got a question. Says, is it safe to use a remote desktop on my personal laptop to connect into my office network? So again, Simon, I don't know if you have a particular view on that. But,
yes, Spider-Man has come to say hello, by the way.
Hi, Spidey.
Could you repeat the question? Was it?
Is it safe to use a remote desktop on my personal laptop to connect into my office network?
Yes. Yeah. So in fact, I'm using my personal laptop now to connect to this, to connect to Cisco assets, to connect to all the applications that we're using. I also use my phone. So yeah, we would expect customers and organizations to use their own. And obviously you want to make sure that they're patched and up to date, but actually Duo will prompt you and say, okay, you don't have the latest operating system, you don't have the latest patches, you don't have the various things that you want, and it will actually show you how to do this. So it's not just going to tell you that and then you've got to figure it out. It'll actually say, okay, here's the link to the website where you actually have to download it. So it kind of walks you through that, which means that you don't then have to call the help desk. You don't have to call your colleagues to figure it out.
And that becomes, that process of keeping things up to date becomes even more important. I was reading on the BBC News the other day that just at the start of lockdown, some security researchers discovered a weakness in Microsoft Teams, which has been patched, and there's no evidence it was exploited, I should hasten to add. But effectively, they were leveraging the ability to just put GIFs, animated GIFs into the persistent chat, and just viewing that could compromise your system. So making sure that all the devices are up to date and using the latest versions of all the software becomes really, really important, doesn't it?
Yeah, and actually that's one of the examples that Kayak gave, is that they had 5 different tools to do different things. So one of them was having device inventory. What have they got? What's deployed on them? What version are they? All of that, which you've normally got to deploy different sort of tools to do, and many small companies wouldn't. It's quite a high burden, quite a high bar to get to do that. Whereas with Duo, it's just done automatically. Which I personally am quite a fanboy for Duo. I used to use it before I joined Cisco, before Cisco acquired Duo. So I've been using it for about 4 or 5 years anyway, personally, and for my previous company. So it just brings a lot of those tooling that you had to have separate tools that did it into one place, and it's all in one dashboard, and you create single policies with all of the elements of that as well.
There's a couple of questions around the details here. So Connor's asking, is it purely to authenticate across cloud-based applications and software? Can you use it to authenticate a connection to a server-hosted CRM in the office, or your Active Directory? And I think the answer is just you can with Duo. If I remember rightly, it's pretty comprehensive, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's any cloud or SaaS, but obviously internally, any application which has a web, it's HTTPS connection, which is probably 80% of the applications we've used in the last 20 years, certainly CRM systems, ERP systems, but also other protocols such as RDP. So if you have remote desktop access into a Citrix environment, for example, it can also work there. Also SSH, so if you're accessing your core applications from a developer perspective, then SSH is the way that you're going to do that. You're going to access your production systems. So Duo also supports that. So yeah, probably 80–90% of, well, unless you're a bank, probably closer to 100% of the applications that you're gonna have. You might, if you don't have mainframe, then you're probably okay.
Games just went through my head then. So Lee's just asking, he says, will biometrics become more available, or will it always be through your mobile phone?
Yeah, biometrics is definitely Cisco invested in 2 companies actually that do biometrics. One's biometrics are looking at your physical characteristics, and another one is very much focused on how you type, the cadence of how you type. It actually looks at 28 different parameters, so that it's continually authenticating who you are. What we're also seeing across the industry is Apple, Microsoft, all the big hardware suppliers, they're actually building this into their devices themselves. So what we need to have right, first of all, is the protocols that we all agree on, and then the hardware makers will start building it into the devices themselves. And Samsung, a big part of this too, and Google, so that we will be continuously authenticating that it is us. So, you know, right now we have a prompt to a personal device. In the future, and I think this will be, you need to opt in or opt out of this, but we'll have a lot of information about the way that we move, the way that we talk, also biometric information that you can have. So I think there's going to be various different ways to connect, but probably passwords would disappear sooner than you might think.
It's interesting, really, because you start to look at you know, the security capabilities that are incredible, but obviously with that comes a challenge for the industry around, you know, privacy. So if the device can automatically detect who I am and where I am, then obviously how we control and regulate that information becomes really important, doesn't it?
Yeah, and certain information, actually you do a lot of processing on the device itself, so that you only send a yes, no to the application. So that so the application or the cloud or the company is not harvesting that kind of more personal data that stays with you, but actually the yes, no decision, that's all that's going to be sent. So I think privacy will be looked at from that perspective.
And then it makes an awful lot of sense. You know, we don't need huge, great big databases of who used what device when and where.
No. Unless it's for critical applications in certain industries, then, you know, you do want that granularity. And there's the concept of adaptive security that you might be allowed, without having to put any password in, access to certain applications, but as you get into more critical data, it's going to start prompting you for more information, or you might have to then provide your biometric information, that kind of thing. So that's definitely where we're moving towards.
Indeed. No, that would be very powerful, wouldn't it, when you start to think about, you know, it's not just am I authenticated onto my CRM system, it's what elements of that and what data I'm manipulating, which dictate how rigorously I'm checked. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and also then looking at how you use it, and do you start to see anomalous activity? So has somebody compromised my account and is downloading data or doing something with it? That's also something that we do within Cisco, is how people, it's called user behavior analytics, so how users are accessing data, how they're using it, and creating a bench or a baseline of that to understand if there's anomalous, also in regard to their peers that they work with. So that technology is out there as well, and will be built in.
And AI remediation as well. There's certain products out in the market now that I know can do some really powerful, perhaps scary stuff, but certainly it needs to, given the rapidity of change that we're seeing. But Simon, I haven't had any more questions from there, so I think, you know, we're on the half hour just a few minutes later than planned, just because of our slight delay starting. So I think thank you ever so much for your time, and we'll wind it up there.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. Everybody stay safe and stay connected.
And if you'd like to join us again next week, our next event is, I had this on the screen 2 minutes ago so that I could read it straight out, then got distracted with the security. So our next event is Microsoft Teams 5 integration. So we'll be with Jamie Evans from Pragmatic, and myself will be looking at how those two tools can integrate and really kind of help you do more. But thank you so much once again, Simon. It's been really, really fascinating, and I wish everybody well. Stay safe. Speak soon.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.